Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews. As always, I'm your host, Chris, and this is a show about all things movies and TV. Got another awesome episode for y'all today. I'm going to go over one bit of news that broke a couple days ago that I'm super excited to briefly talk about. And then I'll also be going over two Amazon Prime reactions to two movies that I did a double feature on this past weekend. And then we'll lead into our featured film of the day, which is Training Day, starring Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke. This will wrap up our LAPD double feature that I've been doing on the show. I'm very excited to finally talk about this movie. It's one of my favorites of all time. One of my favorite Denzel and Ethan Hawke performances. And it's just a great movie to watch along with last time's episode, which was End of Watch with Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena. If you haven't watched or listened to that episode, definitely check it out. It's a really fun time talking about that film. And now I'm going to have a really, really fun time talking about one of my favorite Denzel films of all time. Uh, and then we'll get into some rankings like we always do on the show to wrap everything up. A couple reminders at the top of the episode. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com/the cinematic reviews. You can also listen to the audio version. This was an audio podcast before I threw it up on YouTube this year. So there's hundreds of different episodes in audio version that you can all discover if you have not. From Star Wars, Marvel, I did the Indiana Jones franchise, Transformers films, and other new releases that have come out in the last 3 years or so. You can also follow the show on social media. I post a lot of really cool artwork once an episode premieres, as well as rankings, different announcements that are coming to the show, like Fright Nights, which is coming in the month of October. Every Friday, I'll be doing a review of a scary, spooky movie. And this year's theme is S. So for spooky. So each movie in the month of October on Friday starts with an S. I released that schedule already on social media. We're going to start with Saw. Then we're going to get into Seven, Sinister, Sinners, and then we're going to wrap things up with Scream, which will premiere on Halloween. I don't think I've ever released an episode on a holiday, but since Halloween lines up on a Friday this year, I thought why not take the advantage and release a spooky Scream episode on Halloween night for y'all to watch and listen to while you pass out candy. So that'll be really fun. And then after that, we're going to be getting into Marvel Fridays, which will premiere on November 7th in preparation for Avengers Doomsday, which is scheduled to come out next year in December. So each Friday, starting November 7th, I'll be reviewing a Marvel project in order of the MCU, starting with Iron Man, starting Robert Downey Jr., the first film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm super excited to finally watch these films all the way through and do an episode on it. I haven't done a full MCU rewatch since I believe Endgame came out back in 2019. So this is going to be really fun after a couple of years of not seeing them from start to finish. So take a look, be on the lookout for those when those start popping out on Fridays. Then we'll go through some other franchises and some new releases mixed in there coming next year, and that schedule will come out later on. So with that, let's head over to today's news and reactions. So the piece of news that I wanted to briefly touch on today is Warwick Davis is returning as Professor Flitwick in the Harry Potter HBO Max series. If you're not familiar, Warwick Davis previously played the professor in the Harry Potter films, which starred Daniel Radcliffe as Harry Potter. Now he is coming back to the universe in the reboot series that HBO Max is currently filming. I'm a little conflicted on this. At first, I was super excited, but now when you see Warwick Davis, you're just gonna be pulled back into those movies. I love that he is playing Flitwick again, though, because I thought he was incredible in the movies as that professor. He had definitely had the look of him. He had the mannerisms, the acting chops. I love Ward Davis. He's been an actor that I've grown up with ever since I first saw Willow back in the day. And then he's been in a bunch of other films. He even did a Willow kind of reboot series on Disney Plus a few years ago. He was in Harry Potter, of course, like I mentioned. So he's been kind of a household name for me. So him coming back as Professor Flitwick has me excited, but it also has me worried that when he pops up on screen, you're just going to get pulled back into those movies, and it's going to be tough to kind of separate uh, that same character from the series to the movies. So we'll see if he kind of brings a little bit of a different take to the same character that he did in the movies. But I kind of don't want him to, because he played Professor Flitwick in the film so well that I kind of want him to copy and paste it. But then at the same time, it's tough because you want him to bring something a little bit new that separates the show from the movies, because it's going to make us think, why am I watching this series every week when I should just throw on the movies? So, and that's been a huge debate ever since this show got announced, that it hasn't really been that long since the movies came out. Um, they were really well done, and they're greatly beloved by a lot of people. And it's just going to be really tough to see a new adaptation of something that we've all grown up loving and enjoying, and still watch to this day. I watch it every December with my family. I know some people kind of see it as more of a Halloween series to watch. Me, when it comes to Christmas time, that's when I throw on Harry Potter. I know a lot of network shows have reruns through Christmas. My grandpa always had it on during Christmas, so I kind of carry that tradition as well. So we're gonna see how this show shapes up, with Warwick Davis being the only returning cast member, at least so far, that played the character in the movies and now carrying it into the show. So it's going to be very interesting. We don't get it very often, um, but this is going to be one that a lot of people are going to keep their eyes on to see if he does bring a different take, or if he just copy and pastes that same character that he did in the movies. So uh, we'll find out soon enough. Like I said, that series is currently filming in London, I believe. We've been getting some few behind the scenes shots of Harry Potter running around the streets of London with Rubius Hagrid. So I'm still kind of hopeful for this series, but I'm also very terrified, because I am one of those fans that just really love the books. I love the movies. I think the movies did a great job at kind of bringing its own take, but also respecting the books that J.K. Rowling created. So we're going to see how this Harry Potter series pans out. It sounds like it's going to be a thing for the next 10 years. So we'll see how it goes. The two reactions I had today, two films that I watched back to back on Amazon Prime. They also kind of have the same theme, I guess you could say, is fictional presidents, which I love a good fictional president movie. We've got G20 starring Viola Davis as the first one, and then Heads of State, which stars John Cena and Idris Elba. G20, Viola Davis plays President Danielle Sutton. She is headed to the G20 summit of that year, and a terrorist attack happens by none other than Homelander himself, Anthony Starr, as Rutledge. I think is how you say it. Yeah, Rutledge. It's not the greatest film that I've ever seen. Viola Davis is a phenomenal actress. She did as well of a job as she could. Anthony Anderson is in here as her husband. He's got quite a pretty big role in this movie, surprisingly. He gets very involved in the hostage / terrorist take. And Anthony Starr, Homelander, one of the greatest villains on current TV, maybe even in the history of TV, in the Boys series on Prime. So if you have not seen the Boys, Anthony Starr is freaking amazing as Homelander, and I highly recommend you check that out if you're looking for a really good superhero comic book villain that you want to kind of watch just lose control every season. He's not the greatest villain in this movie. You can see that he kind of tries to separate himself from that Homelander character. He's trying to, do different roles so that he's not, typecasted like a lot of these actors end up being when they do these big streaming shows or movies. But the script is really what holds this movie back. It's not the most exciting, most entertaining script. There is a few scenes that are got some really cool action in it, especially when Viola Davis gets her hands on a machine gun and just starts wreaking havoc to ruin Anthony Starr's plan. Um, and his whole scheme is basically Bitcoin, which I mean, maybe a couple years ago that would have been really relevant, but now with it's not the greatest MacGuffin of this type of movie. And I think it just really fell apart from the script. The cast can only do so much with the directing and the writing. I think who directed this? Patricia Riggin. What has she done? She did the 33, Under the Same Moon. Looks like she directed some episodes of SVU, which is interesting. Directed some episodes of Jack Ryan, which was that's pretty impressive. Lemonade Mouth. So I mean, she got a few hits in there. But I would not put this one in the hit column. I believe I put this. Let me pull up my scale. I gave this 2 popcorn buckets on the scale. So not the greatest thing, but the film that I did actually end up kind of enjoying was Heads of State. This is a kind of a buddy action comedy with John Cena playing U.S. President Will Derringer, and then Idris Elba as the U.K. Prime Minister Sam Clark. They kind of starts off the movie pretty uh, generic, like a lot of these buddy comedies do, where the two leads don't really like each other. They go through a lot of chaos and a lot of story plot, and then they end up being best friends at the end of the film. It's a tale as old as time. But what really excited me about this movie was the action. I'm not the biggest John Cena fan. I do love Idris Elba. I think he's one of the most underrated actors. And I think that's mainly due to just the projects that he decides to do. But he's done a lot of great roles over the years. John Cena is starting to become a huge, name in the movie business. First, being most recognized in the WWE. Then he, like many other wrestlers, switched over to movies. I think he's probably one of the more successful of to do it. Dave Batista had his stretch of movies. The Rock is probably the most successful, followed by probably John Cena, even though I'm not the biggest fan of his movies or the person in general. But he was pretty funny in here. I love him in Ricky Sneaky, which is another Prime film. That's probably one of my favorites of his. But he was pretty good in here. I think the chemistry that him and Idris Elba had throughout this movie was pretty entertaining for the most part. The action, like I said, is probably the reason why I'm going to rank it 3 popcorn buckets, because the action really keeps you entertained for most of the film. The plot is a little bit different than what we've had. We haven't really. I don't think we've ever really gotten, a U.S. president and a prime minister teaming up like this. But I think one of the better, fictional president movies that we've gotten over the last few years is Air Force One with Harrison Ford, where he gets hijacked by Gary Oldman. Then you have the Gerard Butler Olympus Has Fallen universe with Aaron Eckhart as the U.S. president, and then eventually Morgan Freeman. But Jack Quaid pops up in here, another, the boys actor who I starting to really, really like. I think that's my favorite part of the movie is his scene at that, highly classified bunker where he's got the old ass box TV kind of up around his arm because he's looking at the camera footage and he's kind of using his shotgun or his machine gun to kind of use the camera to aim and shoot the terrorists through the walls. I thought that was probably the best scene in the movie. It's really well done. Jack Quaid is hilarious and very entertaining, like he always is. So yeah, I'm giving Heads of State surprisingly 3 popcorn buckets. I originally wasn't going to watch this because, like I said, I'm not a big John Cena fan, but I'm glad I did because I actually quite enjoyed this movie. It's one of the sneaky hits for me of the year, and I do recommend it if you're looking for kind of a turn your brain off buddy comedy action thriller with 2 very big important icons in Hollywood right now. So check out Heads of State on Amazon Prime. And then if you are, a giant Viola Davis fan or an Anthony Starr fan, or you're just looking for something to watch, check out G20 on Amazon Prime as well. Maybe you'll enjoy it a lot more than I did, or maybe you'll see something that I didn't really connect with. So, But yeah, so check out those on Amazon Prime. I'll be kind of scoping through a lot of these other apps and within next week to see what else I've been missing so far this year. So moving on, let's head to our feature film of the day with Training Day, starring Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke.
In the next 24 hours, you will learn about the streets, about the choices that will force a dedicated cop over the edge, all in the name of good. In the next 24 hours, the only thing more dangerous than the line being crossed.
Today's a training day, Officer Hoyt. It's your chance to give you a little taste of reality. You think you can handle it?
Is the cop who has crossed it.
I will do anything you want me to do.
Brilliant. Let's see. If I was a dealer, you'd be dead by now. They build jails because of me. Judges have handed out over 15,000 man-years of incarceration time based on my investigation. You got today, and today only, to show me who and what you're made of. You hear me? That's it. That's what I'm talking about. First day on the job, you hit a $3 million seizure.
Police officer! Get away from the girl!
No. We're not racking up arrests today.
You let him go.
What more you want?
I want justice, right?
Is that not justice?
That's street justice.
What's wrong with street justice?
Oh, what? Just let the animals wipe themselves out.
God willing.
You can't be like this.
Open your eyes. Can't you see? Police, we got a search warrant.
You ain't no police! They're these fools!
I didn't sign up for this.
You think I'm crazy, right?
We communicate and talk to me. Say it. Say it. I think you're a road cop.
Learned a lot of things on these streets, boy. Good things and bad things, too. There's some profoundly evil people walking the streets freely right now.
I'm the police. King Kong ain't got nothing on me.
You never know. That's the point. It's gonna have to be a nice day, huh? It'll get darker. Guarantee you that.
So Training Day, starring Denzel Washington as Alonzo Harris and Ethan Hawke as Jake Hoyt. This is a movie that I've seen probably 10 to 15 times over the years. One of the very first Denzel Washington movies I ever watched. I think it was definitely the first Ethan Hawke movie I ever saw. And it's just an incredible, iconic movie that has so many freaking quotes that a lot of people say out of it. And I'll run through a lot of those quotes later on in the episode. But first, let's kind of give my history of the movie, and then we'll kind of dive into this incredible cast of characters. So like I said, Training Day is a movie I grew up with. I really love Denzel in it, love Ethan Hawke. It's the movie that made me fall in love with Denzel as an actor. He's in my top 5 actors of all time. He's got 2 Oscars, the Oscar coming from this movie, as his portrayal as Alonzo. And then Ethan Hawke, I think he's still kind of an underrated actor at sometimes. But this really kind of skyrocketed him into stardom with his portrayal of Jake Hoyt, a narcotics officer. Former kind of beat cop, now trying to become detective. So the way this department works in LA is if you want to make detective, you have to get through narcotics at some point. And that's where Denzel's character comes in as the kind of leader of this narcotics undercover unit within the LAPD. He is kind of an oddball character, kind of the villain in the movie, so to speak. You can tell that he does things not by the book. He does a lot of things under the table. He has this wild weekend in Vegas that they refer to a lot. And I think that was a really smart decision to just kind of leave that in the background, kind of like an ambiance shadow over it. We don't really open with that. Now, a lot of people have been really excited about maybe potentially, doing a prequel to this movie where we see that weekend in Vegas. where Alonzo racks up, I think, was like $1 million with the Russians. I think some people have even fan casted, an Alonzo with like Michael B. Jordan, which makes sense. But this is a movie I think is untouchable. I don't want a sequel. I don't want, remakes. I don't want prequels to it. This can just be in its own little bubble in Hollywood history. And it's just one of the greatest cop movies ever. Definitely one of the best, like kind of like buddy cop in a way, more of a darker version of it. But Denzel is incredible. He's got that menacing, I don't give a shit attitude. I am using my position as a narcotics undercover for my own gain, for money, so that I can, take my wife and my 4 kids and just go live a happy life with power and control. Whereas, Jake Hoyt is more of a Boy Scout where he wants to, do something good in the community, get these drug dealers off the streets. He wants to make detectives so that he can solve murders. So he's kind of what Denzel was at the beginning, and now living this life as a undercover narcotics agent. It's kind of twisted his mind a little bit to where he is starting to realize that he has a lot of power within the LAPD, and he's using that for his own personal gain. Where Hoyt is a very young, in his 20s, recently married, has a daughter, a very small daughter, and is just trying to do everything by the book and be an actual good cop. And Denzel tries to get it through his skull that that's not how reality works. Like, you need to start focusing on yourself, rip off these drug dealers, rip off these mobsters, and get yourself rich, so that you can financially take care of your family like he does. So it's really cool how to see the yin and yang throughout the movie between Ethan Hawke and Denzel Washington with their philosophies on how they view the badge of the LAPD officer and their place in the world within this division. It's really cool how at the face of it, it's just like, oh, this is another cop movie. But it actually gets pretty deep with the philosophy behind what Denzel is doing in life as this Alonzo character, and Ethan Hawke coming in as this go-lucky Boy Scout who just wants to do good in the world. And Denzel is just like, cut the shit. Like, that's not how reality works. Here you die if you become a good cop. You need to start being one of the criminals and become what you are trying to stop. I was never a cop, but I've heard a bunch of stories, especially with undercovers. You go undercover way too long and you start to kind of blur the lines between reality and fiction. And that's kind of what Alonzo suffers from. He's been undercover for so long that he's basically become what he was. Because they even mention it in that scene with Roger, where Roger's like, he reminds me a lot of you. He goes, yeah, now I opened my eyes to what the world is really like. He was Ethan Hawke at some point, a Boy Scout, wanting to do good in the community. But then he just got sucked into that underbelly of drugs and money and guns, and just kind of lost his vision of reality and just became what he set out to stop. And Ethan, doing his best not to become Alonzo, and he doesn't at the end. It's really cool. I know there's been another, fan theory that maybe they could do a sequel where Jake Hoyt is like captain of the narcotics unit, and they like flip roles where Ethan now has a newcomer coming into that narcotics. But I think doing that would take away the ending of this movie, which is that world is not for Jake Hoyt. Like, he is, one of those meter maids, as Denzel also refers to as, get up in the morning, do your job, do something good in the world. Where narcotics, you have to really get into the dirt. You have to become the underbelly of LA to stop, bigger fish in the world, I guess. So it's really cool to see how at some point Alonzo was Jake. And this is the future of Jake if he does not get out of the narcotics right now. So it will basically eat him alive. So, and as a kid, that's not how I viewed this movie. It was just a really cool cop action movie with Denzel saying really awesome lines and Ethan Hawke trying to be the good guy. as an adult now, as being a podcast movie reviewer, it really let me sink into what this movie is really about, and it's very a philosophical battle on good and evil, and it's really, really awesome that I get to kind of see this movie in that perspective now as I got older. So looking at this incredible cast, I keep mentioning it. Denzel won an Oscar for this. This was his second Oscar, I believe. Let me look up the one before because I'm drawing a blank for the life of me here. Let me get to the awards section. I cannot find out. Here we go. 2 Oscars. So we got Best Performance by a leading role in Training Day. And then before that, where was it? Glory, supporting role in Glory. So that was his first Oscar in 1990. And then he went on to get Training Day in 2002. So since then, he hasn't won an Oscar. He's been nominated a few times. But those are the only 2 that he still has. Like I said, one of my favorite actors of all time. He's in my top 5 for sure. Movies like The Book of Eli. He was in Gladiator 2 most recently. The Equalizer 3. That trilogy of The Equalizer is freaking incredible. If you have not seen those Equalizer movies, those are really awesome. My dad and I really enjoy them. The Little Things was kind of a detective murder case one that came out during COVID. It was a good Denzel performance, but overall the movie wasn't like mind blowing. Magnificent Seven, which he reunited with Ethan Hawke in, that one's a pretty fun one. I love Two Guns with him and Mark Wahlberg. I don't know. I just get a really good kick out of their chemistry in that movie. I know it's not one of the favorites of the Wahlberg filmography, but I really enjoyed those 2 together. Flight's a really good one. I'm really surprised that he didn't win for Flight. I think he got nominated for it, but he was really good in there. Safe House with Reynolds, Unstoppable with Chris Pine, which I really like. He's been just a ton of movies. Man on Fire is awesome. John Q was great. Remember the Titans is another movie of Denzel that I grew up on. I actually saw Training Day before I saw Remember the Titans. I know a lot of people, they probably flipped that as a kid, but I really was into, cops as growing up. I wanted to be a cop at one point, but I just didn't. So I actually watched Training Day before I did Remember the Titans, believe it or not, which seems kind of, backwards, but that's just how I grew up. Ethan Hawke, Jay Coit. Ethan Hawke's an actor that I didn't really grow up with. He was in a few movies that I grew up as a kid. Training Day, of course, being one of them. What was the other one? Let's see if I can find it here. Daybreakers. That's another one that I watched. That was the Assault on Precinct 13. I really like. I didn't see that one till way later. That one came out in 2005. I didn't see that till probably 10 years after that. But he's just an actor that I just never really gravitated towards. Like Training Day was the only thing I really connected with him. And then he ended up doing a bunch of other stuff. He was in Marvel as the kind of the antagonist in Moon Knight. He was in Glass Onion. The Northman, he's pretty good in. Black Phone, I know a lot of people really liked. I didn't care for Black Phone, even though Ethan Hawke was pretty creepy and did a pretty good job. The Purge movie I really like. Sinister is probably my next favorite of his, next to Training Day. I think he was really fantastic in Sinister. And that movie as a whole is really fun. That's one of the movies that I'll be doing during Fright Nights. Very excited to talk about that one and Ethan Hawke in there. Magnificent Seven, like I said, with Denzel, they reunite in 2016 for that. And he's pretty good in there as one of the Magnificent Seven gang. So some of the other actors, we've got Scott Glenn as Roger. I think I've known him in a bunch of stuff. He just kind of pops up. He was in Sucker Punch, Silence of the Lambs. He showed up in White Lotus. He was in the Daredevil Netflix series. He was in Greenland. I think I remember him most from some Zack Snyder Sucker Punch. And then this one. But Scott Glenn is great. I love him as Roger. He is a piece of shit though in here because he's selling dope to kids. And him dying doesn't really make me sad, even though he was a victim in that circumstance of a robbery and a murder. But he still was kind of a piece of crap for selling drugs to kids. So, and that's the one thing Lonzo really likes to point out to Jake in that moment was, why are you so upset about us killing Roger? Like, the guy sold dope to kids. Like, that kind of people need to be 6 feet under the ground, not behind bars. And that's kind of where Jake realizes that Alonzo is not a cop. He is an executioner. Like, he is playing God, picking and choosing who goes to jail, who goes home, and who dies. I mean, one of the most famous lines from this movie is, "Do you want to go home, or do you want to go to jail, or do you want to go home, or do you want a bullet?" I guess in Roger's case, So, and that's a really cool moment there where Jake opens his eyes up to, like, Alonzo thinks he's God behind that shield. And in that moment at the very end, when he shoots Alonzo in the butt, and he rips the shield off of his neck and says, "You don't deserve this," was a really powerful moment for Ethan Hawke. And I love that that was like one of the last scenes in the movie because, in Jake's eyes, yeah, he's right. This badge means something to me. It means protecting people, not stealing and murdering people and picking and choosing, who you deem worthy enough to live and to die, and Scott Glenn was a big role in that and opening up Jake's eyes even further to the world that Alonzo is kind of creating around him. So it was really cool to see that. Eva Mendes pops up in here, which I always forget she's in here. But Eva Mendes is an American treasure for us. She's just been in a bunch of movies. Married to Ryan Gosling for many, many years. I love her in Hitch. The Other Guys as Sheila. Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage. She's been in so many different movies. She was in the Fast and Furious franchise. And then Training Day, of course. She's really good in here. She's got a smaller role in here. She is Alonzo's, lady. And she's got the little boy in the apartment. But she's great. She does her, her nude scene. She's done a few of those over the year. We Own the Nights, probably a famous one of hers where you clearly see her topless. And here you kind of get brief moments in there, but she's no stranger to showing some skin. But she's still a great actress. I think she's very underrated. Probably mostly to the roles that she decides to take on, but she's a great actress. My favorite of hers is probably The Other Guys as Sheila. She's her back and forth with Will Ferrell is hilarious, and I can't wait to do The Other Guys on this podcast. It's probably one of my favorite movies ever. Comedy wise, it's so great. Let's see who else was on the list here. We have Smiley by Cliff Curtis. I love Smiley. That poker scene, I'll talk about a little bit more when I kind of go over my top favorite scenes. But Smiley's great. Him and the other two guys around the poker table with Ethan at the end, towards the end of the movie. And then they shove him into that bathtub and shove a shotgun into his face. But Smiley's great. I love Cliff Curtis. He's been in a few movies over the years, but I remember him most from this and probably The Meg with Jason Statham. And then it looks like he's in Avatar, The Last Airbender, which was terrible, but I remember Push was another one that I remember him in. I guess he was in Die Hard. Sunshine, I remember that one. But Training Day is really the one that I recognize him most for as Smiley, and he's great in here. I can't wait to talk more about that poker scene. Then we got Dr. Dre as Paul. He's one of the crew members of Alonzo. He's the one that Ethan Hawke punches in the face after Paul wants to put a bullet in him. And then Snoop Dogg. I'm gonna kind of go on a Snoop Dogg rant here because that scene with Snoop Dogg as Blue is one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie. And it starts off great where, they roll up to Snoop Dogg, and Ethan's trying to, buy some drugs off of him. And right off the bat, you know, Snoop Dogg not playing around is like he starts sniffing. He goes, "I smell bacon in this motherfucker." Like he is so good in this movie that I fell in love with him ever since. You know, Snoop Dogg is such a worldwide icon, and this movie is probably my favorite out of his whole entire career because he played it so well. He's in the wheelchair the whole time, so he's rolling in. They end up cornering him in that beauty parlor with all those wigs in the back room. You know, Alonzo does that, you know, the pen in the throat trick where he pokes his uvula, making Snoop Dogg throw up and revealing all the drugs that he swallowed. And, you know, it's got so many good lines in that movie, that scene in particular, you know, Jimmy Crack Corn. You know, you can get 10 years per bullet as Alonzo's going through the clip of the pistol. You know, oh, that's 10 years. Oh, there's another that's 20 years. You want to go for 30? Like it's such a really good scene, and it's all thanks to Snoop Dogg just really nailing that blue roll, even though it's like a, I don't know, 5-7 minute scene that he's on camera for, and he just is the movie. Like that is my favorite scene in the whole movie. I watched this movie, a lot of it, because I want to watch that Snoop Dogg scene, and he's just so good in there. I really, really love it. One last name I want to talk about is Sandman's wife, played by Macy Gray. She was kind of a big name in the early 2000s. You know, I think I recognize her from Training Day as that woman that they go to in the house with the fake warrant, and Alonzo ends up stealing some cash. And then she was in Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, as the Macy Day Parade, as the singer in that parade. Those are really the only two roles I know her in. But I remember her name being said a lot in the early 2000s growing up. But Training Day and Spider-Man were the two that I recognize her most from. But she was great in here. You know, she could smell some bull crap in the very beginning when they come in with that fake warrant that ended up being, I think it was like a Chinese restaurant menu that Alonzo gave her. But that seems really cool too, with the way that Denzel was like holding the guns. And I think I have it in a fun fact coming up about why he had the one gun turned this way and the other one like this, and he's kind of going back and forth. There's actually a cop tactic on why he did that. Not really a cop tactic, but like a gun handling tactic, which was really cool. The rewatchability of this movie, like I said, I've watched this like 10 to 15 times. I'm gonna watch it 10 or 15 times more because it's just a cult classic. You know, the Denzel's performance, Ethan Hawke's performance, the quotes. Like this is one of the most quoted movies ever. And I guess on that note, we'll just jump into those quotes right now. Let me pull up my list. I don't remember how many. I think I had like 12 of them on here. Probably the most famous one, you know, King Kong ain't got shit on me, as he's yelling at his big monologue at the end. You know, I'm putting cases on all you bitches. You know, if you see the movie Ride Along with Kevin Hart and Ice Cube, that scene where Kevin Hart's kind of yelling at those bikers, he rips that entire scene from Training Day, which was great. You shot me in the ass, and it's the way Denzel performance where he's just like, he can't believe that Ethan Hawke did that. Like, you shot me in the ass, and he's like, you mother. Like, he's so good in that scene, and I can't believe Ethan Hawke shot him in the ass. That was incredible. Probably like the tagline in the movie: "You want to go to jail or you want to go home." You know, Lonzo says that a bunch of times throughout the movie, and then we get it from Jake at the very end, which is a really cool, you know, full circle where he's asking Alonzo, you know, do you want to go to jail or do you want to go home? When Alonzo's practically begging for him to give him that money because he's got to pay the Russians, you know. Another line, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove, which is another line that Alonzo basically preaches throughout this movie when they're doing their investigations and serving their warrants and stuff. And then Ethan Hawke's like, you've been planning this all day, and Alonzo responds, I've been planning this all week. And it kind of leads into another quote that I have here. Where was it? This shit ain't chess, this shit is chess, it ain't checkers. You know, like, he's thinking 10 moves ahead at all times because he has to, because he's so synced into this underbelly of LA. He's even got the Wisemen, you know, the Wisemen being like the top, you know, cop captains and chiefs and whatnot, DAs, kind of in his pocket. And he has to be 10 moves ahead, or he's going to get killed by people like the Russians that he ripped off. So those lines are great. They build jails because of me. That's a great one there. Nothing's free in this world, Jake. Not even arrest warrants, because even he's got to pay off, a judge or something to get these warrants that he so needs. I love this line from Jake from the poker table scene where they ask him, oh, what's it like to be do you love being a cop and whatnot? And without hesitation, Ethan Hawke just goes, as he's dealing the cards, should have been a fireman. Like, it's so great how he delivers that line. I already talked about this one already, but Jake's saying you don't deserve this as he's ripping the LAPD cop badge off of Alonzo's neck. It's no fun when the rabbit has a gun, is it? That's so great from Jake. You're in the office, baby, as Alonzo's referring to as his car, which was a really great way to kind of change things up. When we're never in like a precinct or a department building at all. It's all on the streets of LA. Like, the movie starts in a cafe at the very beginning with Alonzo reading the paper, and it's such a great scene. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I get to the fun facts. There's a fun fact about that scene. But we don't go into any jails. We don't go into any precincts. This is all on the streets of LA, and his office is the car. It's really cool how they did that. To protect the sheep, you got to catch the wolf, and it takes a wolf to catch a wolf. Another one of Alonzo's favorite lines or wisdoms to Jake. You got to control your smiles and cries because that's all you have, and nobody can take that away from you. That was that fun scene where, Jake is high on crack as they go to Roger's house, and they're, asking Jake to tell a story and all that, and he goes, you have to control I figured out the streets. You have to control your smiles and your cries because they can't take away from you. And it's got really deep for a moment as he's, high on crack in Roger's house. You got to hide that love deep inside. You understand, referring to, don't wear your wedding ring. Don't let, the perps get into your head, threaten your family and all that, which is very smart. I've been told by a lot of cops that a lot of them don't wear their wedding ring. They don't even mention having a family or being married or having a girlfriend or having kids to a lot of these perps that they are investigating or arresting because, they don't want any retaliation on their family, and it's protecting their family, which is really smart. I mean, I would probably do the same thing. I'd be scared to wear my wedding ring if I was out patrolling in LA, because you never know who's going to show up at your house. Nobody told you to smoke that thing. You made the decision. Live with your decision. Ain't like I put a gun to your head. Well, he kind of did at the very beginning, but it goes back to that saying, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So, that's another great line there right before, he takes a couple big hits of crack through the pipe. Didn't know you get wet, dog. That's another referring to as Jake smoking crack in the car. And then the last line I got here, just let the animals take care of themselves. And then Alonzo responds, God willing, as Jake's just like, we should be arresting people. Where's the justice? And Alonzo's like, we got better things to do. Like, let these, these drug dealing cretins, basically eat each other while we get rich off of them. And that's not how Jake views being a cop. He wants the criminals off the street. He wants everyday citizens following the law, being able to come out onto the streets and do their thing without being disturbed by some drug dealer getting robbed or shot. So just the big philosophy between Alonzo and Jake is really, really awesome in this movie. The action is great. There's actually quite a bit of action, more action than I remember there being in here. You got the shootout in front of Macy Gray's house where, like I said, Alonzo does the cool gun trick. You get that big fist fight between Jake and Alonzo on the top of the houses and the projects. But before that, get the shootout inside the apartment that Alonzo lives in with Eva Mendes and her son. You get that really cool action sequence in the alleyway where the two junkies are trying to rape this 14-year-old girl. So Ethan Hawke takes it upon himself to beat the crap out of him. And then Denzel ends up getting into it. I mean, that scene that really shows you the difference between Ethan and Denzel. Ethan, he's subduing the perps. He's got them in handcuffs. He's ready to read them the rights, book them and hook them, and send them to jail. Alonzo doesn't do that. He takes the drugs, he takes their money, and he humiliates them. He does the old, what was it? The one the guy says, suck my dick, cop. And Denzel's like, oh, really? You want me to? Okay, here it is. He pulls out his gun and says, here, suck on my gun. This is my LAPD dick. And that's just, the two different versions of the type of cop that Alonzo and Jake are. And it's really, really cool to see that in real time of how polar opposites they are when it comes to the badge. It's really, really cool. So some of those fun facts I was talking about, Denzel actually ad-libbed that famous quote, King Kong ain't got shit on me. That's really cool that just straight came from Denzel. Really, really cool. During the card playing scene, Antoine Fuqua, who is the director, I'll talk about him in a little bit, gave certain instructions to the actors playing the Latino gangsters, Smiley and the gang, in order to confuse Ethan Hawke and add more tension to the scene. That's really cool. When I read that fun fact, that changed that scene completely for me. Ethan being really, or Jake being really confused is real, because Ethan Hawke was confused in that scene because of the director constantly changing things and telling the other actors to make him confused, to make it more authentic and disorienting for Ethan Hawke. I thought that was a great thing to do. Tobey Maguire was actually seriously considered for the role of Jake Hoyt. He even followed undercover narco officers for 2 months. Ethan Hawke was Antoine Fuqua's first choice, though, and then when he became available, Tobey Maguire was dumped. I would love to see a Tobey Maguire version of this movie, but I think Ethan Hawke was perfect. I think Antoine Fuqua got that right the first time. Ethan Hawke is Jake Hoyt, even though I am very curious to see Tobey Maguire's take. I think he could have did a pretty decent job there. Eminem was offered the role of Jake, naturally, but turned it down to stay available for 8 Mile. Now, I love 8 Mile. I think that was a better choice for Eminem to sit out on this and to go to 8 Mile, because he's really good in that movie. This is a role for Ethan Hawke. Like, I don't think anybody else could have played it to the level that Ethan did. Although Eminem is an interesting choice. Again, I probably would enjoy seeing a version where Eminem is Jake Hoyt. But at the end of the day, if I had to pick out of anybody, it would be Ethan Hawke to play Jake. He was just fantastic in there. The copy shop scene was filmed in the same shop used in the film Seven, which is another movie I'll be talking about during Fright Nights. In both films, the coffee shop is named Quality Cafe. If you've seen Seven, you know that scene where Morgan Freeman and Gwyneth Paltrow are talking over breakfast about how she's pregnant. She hasn't told Brad Pitt yet. That is the same. Now, I don't know if it's the same booth. It looked like the same booth, but it is the same cafe that the movie starts in, where Jake comes in to sit down with Alonzo. Alonzo's trying to read the paper. Ethan's kind of nervous. He's excited, so he's kind of twitching, and he's asking questions. Alonzo's told him, hey, order something. I'm reading my paper. Don't disturb me. Ethan, he's got a lot of energy. He's ready to get the day going, and he interrupts Alonzo. So then he goes, okay, Jake, tell me a story. I come here to read my paper to learn a story, and you interrupted my story. So entertain me now. So then Jake talks about, his old partner, and Alonzo doesn't really, get entertained by it. But it's a really great scene to show you how the dynamic is between Ethan and Denzel right off the bat. So that's really cool that coffee shop is kind of used in multiple cop movies. Alonzo Harris is actually based on a disgraced LAP officer, Rafael Perez, I think is how you say it. I haven't looked up too much about Perez, but it seems legit that he is based on that LAPD officer. And then the word fuck is used 207 times in this film. Not surprised, most of them coming from Denzel, I'm sure. So to talk about a little bit about the director, Antoine Fuqua, fantastic director. I love his work. Training Day is definitely my favorite. But he was involved with a bunch of other movies that Denzel did, like the Equalizer films. He did some other ones like Will Smith's Emancipation film for Apple. But Antoine Fuqua has been pretty attached to Denzel lately, mainly with the Equalizer series and then Training Day. But he's a great director. He's also an actor. I've seen him in a few uh, movies and shows over the years. But he did a fantastic job directing this film. I think, with the cast and the director and the script, this David Ayer, who directed End of Watch, wrote the script for this movie. If you have anybody else doing this movie isn't a cult classic, I don't think. It needed Denzel at the time that it did. It needed Ethan Hawke at that time. It needed David Ayer's script. It needed Antoine Fuqua's direction and his skills as a director. It's just kind of those lightning in a bottle movies. It's an untouchable. I don't want to see a sequel. I don't want to see prequels, series, or remakes, or any of that. This is one of the more perfect films from start to finish, and it's like, I think that's the best way I could say it. It's lightning in a bottle. It needed to be made at the time it did with the people that it did. Otherwise, it's not the cult classic that we have today. It's just really, really good. So to kind of wrap things up, my favorite scenes got to be the Snoop Dogg scene. The poker table scene's really great, where Jake is playing some what was it? It was blackjack or something. I can't remember what game they were playing off the top of my dome, but I think it was 5-card stud maybe. But they're talking shit. I love how he's kind of suspicious of these guys, but he also is trying to play the role of, okay, let's keep things calm. I'll play a few hands with these guys while Alonzo uses the bathroom. Alonzo ends up sneaking out of the bathroom because this is part of the business where Jake is a loose end. He doesn't want to take part in the money that they took from Roger. So he's got to get rid of him. So he pays off Smiley to basically end Ethan Hawke. But it turns out through some weird small world universe where that 14-year-old girl that Ethan saved from the two junkies in the alleyway early on in the movie is actually the niece to Smiley. And luckily he kept the wallet in his pocket, and Smiley kind of puts two and two together, gets the real story, and he ends up sparing Ethan's life because he helped out his niece. I know some people might think of it as like, oh, that's just movie bullshit. It makes sense though. I mean, like that neighborhood isn't, a big neighborhood. So, I mean, the odds are of him running into, she even mentions it in the beginning of the movie where she's, yelling at those two junkies where, he's like, oh, my cousin, my uncle is part of, whatever gang they are. I can't remember the name of the gang. And then that kind of goes full circle at the end of the movie where we realize that she was talking about Smiley. And then they end up reconciling because Ethan Hawke is a good guy and he showed respect in saving the niece. That tub scene is so intense where, you get the shotgun in Ethan Hawke's face. His head's all bloody from getting hit by the flower pot, I think. The three guys got him pinned down in the tub. He's all taped up, and then the Hector guy ends up being like, oh wait, let me get his wallet. They could have just blasted him right there, but last minute thinking's like, oh, let me get his wallet. Maybe he's got some money in there. Ends up being her wallet with her school picture, and so Ethan Hawke gets saved by doing something good, which is kind of almost the moral of the story. It's kind of cool how you can see it where, Jake is the one that wanted to save the girl. Alonzo wanted to just keep going. So Jake ends up saving this girl, doing the good thing, and he ends up going home to his wife. Alonzo, on the other hand, didn't want to help the girl. He robbed Roger. He killed Roger. Took money from the Russians, and then he's the one that's dead. So at the end of the day, it's like, do good things will happen. Do bad things, and you're going to get blown away by 1,000 bullets by Russians. So that was really cool to kind of think now after all these years of watching Training Day. Another scene I love the robbery at Rogers, where, Denzel does this thing where, he, what was that? I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so he's got that mindset of, Roger's a piece of shit. He sold drugs to kids. He's got all this money, wants to retire after, doping up these kids. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to take his money because I need it more than him. I need to pay off these Russians or they're going to kill me. Roger can get more money, and it's a really intense scene where Jake is kind of thrown in the middle here. He's like, what the hell is going on here? They're robbing the money. Jake's like, we need to book this as evidence. We need to take Roger in. Denzel's like, yeah, we're not doing that. We're stealing this for ourselves, and we're going to kill Roger because he's a loose end, you know? So, and the way they stage it's pretty cool. They shoot one of their guys to kind of make it look like Roger fought back, but he really didn't. Lonzo shoots Roger in the chest with a shotgun, but they give Jake the credit of taking down an armed assailant. And Jake's like, no, fuck that. I'm not getting involved in this. So that was a really good scene there. That really opened up Jake's eyes to what Alonzo is. He is judge, jury, and executioner. He's playing God. He's deciding who lives and who dies, who deserves money, who doesn't deserve money. So that scene those are probably my top 3 favorite scenes for sure. Snoop Dogg is really good. I love watching that Snoop Dogg scene. I'll even hop up on YouTube just to watch that scene periodically. It's so good. So yeah, let's do what we always do, and we're gonna head to some rankings. So for today's rankings, I'm going to go over my top 5 Denzel performances, my top 5 Ethan Hawke performances. We'll do a blockbuster showdown between End of Watch and Training Day, and then I'll give my popcorn scale for Training Day. So kicking off with the Denzel rankings, this one's a little different. So within my actual top 5, I've got all 3 Equalizer films at 2, 3, and 4. So for podcasting sake, I'm gonna put the entire Equalizer trilogy under one. So when I get to that, that'll make more sense. So at number 5 for today's, which is actually my number 7, is Man of Fire. I really love Denzel and his relationship with Dakota Fanning in Man of Fire. This is the Tony Scott film where Denzel is a former CIA operative, John W. Creasy, who is tasked with protecting Dakota Fanning's character throughout this movie. Really fantastic action. Really great. This movie is built on the chemistry with Denzel and Dakota Fanning. Very young Dakota Fanning. This was back in 2004. So a couple years after Training Day. But, Christopher Walken's in there. Mark Anthony is in there. Mickey Rourke shows up in there. Like, it's a great cast. But Tony Scott is a really good director. Him and Denzel were like attached to the hip before Tony Scott ultimately passed away, unfortunately. But they did a lot of movies together. Man of Fire is definitely up there as one of their best ones that they did together. So that is my number 5 for today. Number 4, this is where I have Unstoppable. Surprise, surprise! It's another Tony Scott film. I believe this was the last or one of the last films that Tony Scott directed before his unfortunate passing. It stars Denzel as Frank and Chris Pine as Will. They are workers of the railroad. They are tasked with stopping a unmanned half-mile long freight train that is barreling through, I believe they're in Pennsylvania, maybe. I don't remember which city they're in this one. It looks like Pennsylvania. But it's a really cool train action. Like, when this movie came out, my dad was actually working for BNSF at the time. So when I bought this movie for him, it was really cool to watch it with him, where he's, explaining all the mechanics and everything that he did on a train. And he seemed like he really enjoyed it. This is like a drastic situation where what would happen if like an unmanned train was barreling through the tracks at God knows, the speed of light, and it takes these 2 guys to stop it. It's a really cool action movie. Definitely check it out. I really love watching Unstoppable. It's one of my favorite Denzels for sure. Moving on to number 3, Remember the Titans. This is the movie that Denzel will be most known for. this and Training Day. But Remember the Titans is such a great movie. He plays Coach Herman Boone, who is tasked with being the head coach of a newly segregated high school in 1971. We have Will Patton as the former head coach, now assistant coach, Bill Yost. It's got Ryan Hurst, Wood Harris, Ethan Suplee's in there. Kate Bosworth's in there. Ryan Gosling shows up in there. Hayden Panettiere is in there as Will Patton's daughter. Really good football film. Really good Denzel performance. I love how he coaches this team. The football scenes are really cool to watch. But you're in it for the characters. You know, you fall in love with all these characters. Even Coach Boone, even though he's kind of a hard ass, you end up falling in love with him. And it's a great family film to watch on a piece of history where, you know, this is what they had to deal with back then when these schools were first, you know, segregated, and now that they're integrated with whites and blacks. And it's just a really cool piece of history to watch. And Denzel's really, really terrific in there. So that is number 3 for me. Number 2, this is where I put the Equalizer trilogy. I absolutely love Denzel's Equalizer movies. Antoine Fuqua directed them. And he is really good at action. He's really good at, you know, being that kind of older protector to these younger casts coming up. And it's a great story. David Harbour pops up in the first film. I know the third film, I actually covered the third film on the show when it came out. Dakota Fanning, they rejoined in there from Man of Fire. The second one had Pedro Pascal as the antagonist in there, so that was really cool. So the Equalizer trilogy, I'm going to lump them together. That is at number 2 for me. And then number 1 is Training Day. Surprise, surprise. I kind of hinted at that at the beginning of the episode today. But Denzel, you know, he won the Oscar for it. He's just fantastic as Alonzo. Absolutely love him. My favorite performance for sure. So that is number 1, Training Day. 2, the Equalizer trilogy. We'll just lump that together. 3, Remember the Titans. 4, Unstoppable. And 5, Man of Fire. Switching over to Ethan Hawke. This was a little tougher, but I did figure out my top 5. Number 5, we've got Boyhood. That is a movie that I just recently watched, probably a couple of days ago. But I really, really, really like Ethan Hawke in there. He is the dad to the main character, Mason. So Ethan Hawke kind of pops in and out of there. It's a really cool movie how they did this, where it spans like 12 years and it kind of cuts it up into different segments of Mason's life. But Ethan's role in there as his dad is really great. And it's just a really, really fun father-son movie to watch on how Mason handles, you know, the crazy thing of life. Number 4, I have The Purge. This is the Blumhouse film that Ethan Hawke did. He's really good in here. It's not my favorite Purge movie, but he is really good in it. I like him. I like Lena Headey in there. If you're not familiar with the Purge series, basically what it is, it's one night of the year, all crime is legal, including murder. The siren goes off, I believe, at like 7 p.m. Everything from cops, ambulances, hospitals, any kind of medical or help service is down for 12 hours, 7 a.m. Everything is against the law. The only thing, you know, that's off limits is like high-ranking officials in the government. You know, like class 3 or higher weapon isn't allowed. So like freaking tanks, bazookas, stuff like that. But the first movie is very, very self-contained. It only happens in Ethan Hawke's house. You know, as you know, we get to the Purge Anarchy and election year and the first Purge and all that, it starts to spread. You know, we're going all over the city. Here, this is just a very contained movie inside one house on Purge night. It's a really interesting concept. You know, a lot of people ask me, like, do you really think the Purge could happen? Absolutely not. There's no way something like the Purge would ever get passed or allowed in the U.S. But this is a franchise that I would like to cover on the podcast eventually, because it is a very entertaining and very interesting topic to talk about after you watch it. And it's done by Blumhouse, which is like the king of horror right now. But Ethan Hawke is really good in there. I really like him. So that was number 4. Number 3, this is a very, very young Ethan Hawke. But this is Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams. Ethan Hawke is really good in there. This is about the teacher John Keaton returns to the prestigious New England boys boarding school, where he basically teaches them poetry. And they start this secret group called Dead Poets Society, using poetry to embolden his people's, self-preservation, basically. So, really great Robin Williams performance. Rest in peace to him. He died way too young. But Ethan Hawke plays Todd Anderson in here, one of the students under Robin Williams, and he's really good. I really love Ethan Hawke in there. Very, very young. What did this come out? 1989. So yeah, it's a pretty young Ethan Hawke, but he's really good in there. Number 2 is Sinister. I can't wait to talk about Sinister in October. One of my favorite Ethan Hawkes of all time. He plays Ellison Oswalt, a author of true crime. He ends up buying the house where a family was murdered for his next book. But turns out, he stumbles across a box of videotapes in the attic, and there's a very secret and disturbing demonic figure attached to those videotapes. I don't want to spoil too much if you haven't seen it yet, because I'm going to basically spoil the entire movie during that review episode in October. But very intense. One of the most intense movies I've ever seen. If you want a movie that's going to get your heart rate going for like an hour and a half, definitely watch Sinister. There's a particular scene in there, and you probably know which one I'm talking about if you've seen it, that after watching this 10 times, still scares me. It still gets me jumping out of my couch. Like, it's so good. The rewatchability of this movie is very, very surprisingly good. Even if you watch it and the scares are coming, it's still going to get you. It's so well done. And Ethan Hawke is very, very good in there as Ellison. And then number 1, just like Denzel, is Training Day. Ethan Hawke as Jake Hoyt is my favorite role of his. He was fantastic in here. This is the role that really defined his career, and I think he was his best at as Jake Hoyt. So that is my top 5 for Ethan Hawke. Boyhood at number 5. 4 is The Purge. 3 is Dead Poets Society. 2 is Sinister. And 1 is Training Day. So what is my popcorn scale for Training Day? Well, that is the golden popcorn bucket for sure. So that puts End of Watch and Training Day at the same spot in the popcorn scale ranking. So who is going to beat the Blockbuster Showdown? This is tough, but I did pick a winner. It's probably going to be a very unpopular choice, but I'm going with End of Watch as the Blockbuster Showdown winner. Now, a lot of people might not agree with it, but if I were to put on one of these movies before the other, it's probably going to be End of Watch. I love the chemistry between Jake Gyllenhaal and Michael Pena. I love the story that we get to get thrown on. I love the accuracy with all the cop stuff. The action is freaking amazing. The ending is so gut-wrenching that it's just painful to watch, but it's so well done. Now, this is nothing against Training Day, and I'm very surprised. At the beginning of this kind of double feature episodes, I would have probably picked Training Day to win. But after rewatching both of these for the podcast, I'm going with End of Watch as the winner. And that's very surprising as I say it right now. But that doesn't take anything away from Training Day. It's still a cult classic. One of my favorite movies of all time. One of the best cop-related movies that I've ever seen that's ever been made. but there's just something with End of Watch that just stuck with me. And I just absolutely, absolutely love End of Watch. So I am making End of Watch the Blockbuster Showdown for this double feature. So I will post all of that on social media for y'all to see. Looking ahead, we're going to dive into the Middle Earth. We are going to be dipping our toes into Middle Earth with the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Now, eventually I will do The Hobbit, and then I thought about doing The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings together, but I think I'm going to separate them. I'm going to do the 3 Lord of the Rings films first, and then probably sometime next year I'll put on The Hobbit on the schedule. But we're going to do the extended editions. I absolutely love the extended editions over the theatrical. Nothing against the theatrical, it's still really good. But when I rewatch Lord of the Rings, I always watch the extended because I want the full scope. I want the full story that Peter Jackson was telling. So it's my dad's favorite franchise ever, probably. So I'm going to rewatch these, and hopefully I do them proud with my reviews of them. But I'm very excited to finally do the Lord of the Rings on the podcast. So starting next week, we'll be doing the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring extended edition. Then we'll go into Two Towers, and then we're going to the Return of the King. And then I will reveal what else we're going to do for the rest of the year for the podcast. So get ready for the Lord of the Rings. Fire it up this weekend because it's about, if I remember right, that extended edition is probably a good 4 hours, maybe more. I think it might be even closer to 5. We'll find out. I haven't watched them in a while, which is another reason why I wanted to do it on the podcast, because it's been a few years since I've seen the Lord of the Rings, and I want to jump back into that franchise. So we're gonna bring the ring to Mount Doom for the next 3 episodes of the show. So stay tuned for that. That'll do it for today. Always remember, it's not what you can. Oh, what did I just totally messed that up. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. Just remember that the next time you want to commit a crime, because Jake Hoyt is going to come after your ass. Later, everyone.